Haley. I am Fairfax Surrogacy's program coordinator, and I am here today with Fairfax Surrogacy's newest case manager, Joyce, who is also an experienced surrogate herself. We're going to go ahead and ask her some questions that are based around her experience as a surrogate. Obviously, this is very valuable when you are a case manager to connect with your case manager when you're in the process of your own journey. So let's just dive right into it. Hi, Joyce. Thanks for being with us today. How did you first become a surrogate? How did you have the motivation to do this journey?
So my first journey was really centered around the experiences that I had. I was super young when I first was introduced to the idea of surrogacy because my first pregnancy. So I delivered my son in 2009, and I was fortunate enough to have my aunt in the room with me during my birth. My aunt, unfortunately, is unable to carry children due to some illnesses that she suffered with in life. She's phenomenal. She's so amazing and so kind and caring. And so to me, I thought, how cruel almost that she's not able to achieve pregnancy. And I thought that my whole childhood, and then of course when I became a parent, it really just that sort of resonated with me. So my son was born, she's in the room, and I'm looking at her through tears of happiness and just overwhelming moments. And I saw her happy for me, but in that same moment, I saw this void in her eyes. And I knew that because of how successful my pregnancy was and how honored I was to be able to achieve pregnancy and go through the journey itself of motherhood, I wanted to be able to do that for someone, whether it was right there in that moment, because I told her, if you ever want to have kids, I'll carry your baby for you. That planted a seed in me, and I wanted to do that for someone. I wanted to be able to carry their child and bring that baby into this world simply because they couldn't. I had seen so many people experience infertility during my childhood, into my teens, and of course into my own journey to motherhood, that I wanted to be able to help in some form. And then surrogacy came along. I started to research it, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's the long answer to a very short explanation, that others suffer with infertility, and there are people in this world that are fortunate enough to not have that problem, and those two people decide to get together and bring a baby into the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Being an experienced surrogate myself, I relate very much to that. It's beautiful that you had the heart to want to help someone in the way that you've experienced, and that's something I always share too. What did you take away from it the most that led you to wanting to pursue this again?
I am an experienced surrogate. I've carried twice. The first time I carried was for my husband's aunt and uncle. So that journey, the way that kind of came to fruition was I had expressed to friends and family that after my children were born, after our family was complete, we had spent several years deciding to do surrogacy. And so I jumped on Facebook and I made an announcement, hey, I want to be a surrogate, looking for prayers and well wishes. And it was about 30 minutes later, my husband's aunt reached out, and the synchronicity in that was just so beautiful, because my whole initiation to surrogacy was because of my family member. And then to have my husband's family member step forward and say, hey, this could be something that would work with all of us, was just really awesome. So my first journey I carried for family, super close by, like 15 minutes from my home. We were very close and still are. It was a beautiful journey, and having completed an entire first journey with them, and how beautiful it went, and how I was able to do something so impactful within 9 months of my time, it was almost a no-brainer to carry a second time. If my body was willing, if I was able, if I had full medical approval. Of course, I had my husband who's super supportive, and my family and friends. So the second journey really just came to fruition because of how successful the first one was.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So we've connected before. Obviously, we do work together. So I know that you have experienced an independent journey and a journey with an agency. Would you share what was the difference between the two journeys that helped you to realize you'd like to work with an agency following an independent journey?
The first journey was for family. So we had the foundation, we had the relationship, and I didn't have to go and seek a family to carry for. So it wasn't that I initially chose to not work with an agency. It's just in that setting, it wasn't even something that had come up. The first journey was beautiful in every way possible. I got pregnant with twins. We did a double embryo transfer, so the likelihood of it being twins was pretty high. But I noticed throughout the journey, there were aspects that I wanted to fully immerse myself in and fully enjoy. And it kind of was overshadowed by the responsibilities that were in that process. So while I was elated at a double heartbeat confirmation, I knew very quickly that we needed to re-involve the attorneys and kind of understand what the next process was. I was super excited backing up to the medical screening aspect of things, but there was a lot of logistics that went into that. And I knew for my second journey, I didn't want to have those additional responsibilities. I wanted to be able to fully enjoy the journey for what it was and not have to worry about the logistics of everything. I didn't want to have to seek out a clinic to go to for medical screening. I had an attorney in mind, but I didn't really want to have to go back and forth with the attorneys to go over all of the logistics of everything. While I'm able to look at the contract and understand it, I was doing so much more work than that in the first journey. So it honestly boiled down to the experience that I was hoping to have. For me, I'm very type A. I love to make schedules and plans and have color coded everything in life. But for pregnancy and especially for surrogacy, I really like to be able to sit back and enjoy and experience everything and not have to worry about all the legwork that goes into it.
That is great. I've only experienced working with an agency and it's so much more structured. And like you said, type A planner, and that's obviously what an agency is going to help you. So I'll ask you this. Did you feel like that was your goal and intentions, but did you feel the difference between the two? Not necessarily the journey, the pregnancy, the baby, and the relationship, but that hand holding, the guidance, the organization. Did you feel a difference between the journeys?
I did. I very much so did. When it comes to the logistics of the journey itself, it didn't overshadow any aspect of my journey the second time around. Again, both journeys were beautiful and absolutely wonderful in every way. But I noticed the second journey, I was able to relax. I was able to create this relationship with my intended parents. The first journey, I was related to the family. So again, we had a foundation, we had that starting point. But the second journey, I didn't know them. My agency was beyond phenomenal with matching. They knew who I needed. They understood my values, my morals, where I needed to be in life, and they were great at connecting me with the right family. To this day, I still have a relationship with both, obviously, my first family that I carried for, but my second family that I carried for became family. We often text, I get beautiful pictures and updates from them, and I owe that entirely to that agency being able to support me and really just being an extension of what our journey was meant to be from the beginning.
I love the way you share your journeys and that there is such a contrast, but they were also so wholesome and life-changing for you. And it's beautiful what you've been through. And I'm over here like, I want to do it again and again and again. And I imagine you feel the same way. I know we've discussed that you're married. So partner involvement as a case manager, as well as a former surrogate yourself, that it's very important to have their support. So I would love for you to share, how did you bring it up to your spouse the first time or even the second time? What was his initial, I guess, response to you letting him know you would like to be a surrogate?
My initial conversation with my husband happened very shortly after the birth of our first son. And again, I think that everyone around me was just, what are you talking about? What? Like, I think as a first time mom, a lot of people think, oh, she's just so in love with her new baby and she just wants to be pregnant and all these things. But honestly, it came down to the feeling that I had as a parent. I wanted someone else to be able to replicate or have. And if they weren't able to achieve pregnancy, that was more my goal, is to be able to help that family. And so when I brought it to my husband, I think my son was maybe a week old because, of course, I told my aunt right there in the room the moment my son was placed on my chest. My husband, I'm sure, overheard it, but I didn't actually say anything to him until about a week later, where I'm holding our son and I'm looking at him and I start talking about my aunt. And I start talking about she would absolutely love this moment. She would absolutely love the sleepless nights. She would love getting up to change a diaper and just all of these things. And I started talking to him about it, and he's like, what, where are you going with this? And I said, I want to have a baby for someone. And he's like, we just had one. And so it didn't really click with him initially. But the more I started talking about it and the more I started showing him, hey, this is a real thing. We really took time to talk. We talked about the risks that are involved with surrogacy, with being pregnant in general, and that can be infertility for the person that is pregnant. So that was one factor that we really took and considered. We wanted to be done with our family before we pursued surrogacy. And I know that there are situations where women who will have a family, do surrogacy, and then go on to carry their own children. And that's phenomenal. But for us, it was really important that we make sure that we're done, not only because we wanted to have our family complete, but also with the risk of potentially not being able to have any more children after that. We just didn't want to have that worry kind of overshadowing the journey itself. So 2013 rolled around, and our final kid daughter. I have two boys and a girl, was born. And he's like, okay, is this really happening? And so it was a decent 5 years in between my first birth and my last birth. And I said, yeah, this is really happening. We're doing this. And he was like, okay, all right. So when I sent that first message into Facebook, into social media, sharing that this is what we wanted to do, and his aunt was the first person to respond, of course, I'm laying in bed at night and I kind of shake him. I'm like, your aunt just reached out. And he was, I think it was just like an epiphany moment for him, because he's like, we've been talking about this for so long and you wanted to carry for your aunt. So he connected those dots before I could connect them for him. And he, from that moment on, has been my biggest supporter. He has gone from my best friend to my husband to the father of our children to a resource for my intended fathers that I carried for in 2018. And of course, it was super special for him to witness the twin pregnancy for his aunt and uncle. So by far, my husband has been my biggest supporter, biggest cheerleader. He talks to random people about surrogacy probably just as much as I do at this point in life. And he would be the one person that I would go to if I ever considered carrying again. He'd be the first person I'd talk to, because I think it's super important as a surrogate, as a wife, as a mother, to have that support system and it be a consistent, steady person who you can be like, is this totally crazy? Am I crazy for doing this again? They may say yes, but they're also going to talk to you through the process. And he's been just that. So
Your family sounds so sweet. This is what it's all about, building families together. It is mind-blowing how much that support system you're going to lean on them. And it sounds like you did just that. And I love that you also shared how he continues to talk about surrogacy. And I love that he was so supportive for you. Our surrogates are very curious about partner involvement. And I love that you are able to share your experience and how supportive he was there for you. We get a lot of these questions from our partners that we screen, and they want to know what exactly, when and where and how. What were some of his concerns, if any?
honestly, he did. He had concerns because he's my husband and he's my protector. And this isn't something that anyone should ever go into lightly. It is a life altering decision. You're literally bringing life into this world. And so there's factors and risks that go into that. I think his biggest question in the beginning was the emotional aspect that it would have on his wife. And so, very fair question to ask. We are carrying a child and bringing this child in the world. We're feeling the kicks, we're feeling the movements and the ultrasounds and all of the beautiful aspects that pregnancy can bring on. What happens after this baby goes home to its parents? Where is my wife emotionally? Where is she at mentally? How do I support through this? And it came down to, in the beginning, I didn't know. You have this idea as a woman that you're going to carry this pregnancy, you're going to give this baby back to its parents, and it's going to be wonderful. And I would say about 95% of the time, that's exactly how it plays out. But we are women. We are emotional creatures. We do have a connection to this journey. And I did have postpartum emotions. A lot of times people assume that those postpartum emotions are related to the baby going home. For me, it wasn't the baby going home. It was that the journey itself was coming to what I thought was an end. And as a repeat surrogate, as someone in case management, I try very hard to explain that it's not an end. It's more so a new beginning of sorts. So we're closing the chapter on that pregnancy and that beautiful aspect into parenthood for those families. But we are also starting something new. We've just completed probably one of the most empowering moments of our life. And now we have this whole new experience that we can share, we can elaborate on, we can You put that in our list of achievements, if you will, that we've literally brought life into this world for someone else. And there is no, I guess, monetary, if we want to start with that, equivalency to what we've done. And it's empowering.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just love your story. I love hearing about your partner and your support that you had. You're so well spoken, and you did do something very life-changing for two families and for your family as well. How did you feel about the distance between you and your intended parents?
So the first journey, they were local, so there really wasn't a whole lot of distance. That was great, but that's not really the norm for gestational surrogacy journeys. My second journey, they were further away, states away, and the distance itself really didn't impact our journey because we were able to kind of form a relationship through very organic situations. So quick text messages prior to the transfer itself. We talked about, they actually met with me during my medical clearance appointment, which was super fun. We met up in Vegas, so lots and lots to do there. We went to dinner and it kind of just hit off from there. So we told each other right then and there, this was at embryo transfer. So we'd gotten all the way past medical screening through contracts and we're at the transfer. And we kind of made a promise in that moment that we were going to just be real with each other. And pregnancy is not all rainbows and sunshine. And they were like, if you're nauseous, tell us. If you're craving something, please tell us. And just be yourself. So clearly we matched based on how we were as humans, as married people, as potential parents for them and parents for ourselves. And so we took all of that and really just kind of ran with it. I really didn't hold back when it came to talking to them. And I am very grateful for that because that's given us this really amazing relationship 5 years down the road. So the distance itself wasn't a factor for our relationship because just like we have friends and family all over the world, I now have an additional 2-3 family members that live just a few states over.
I think that might be a common misconception, is that the distance is going to impact your relationship. And I have friends all over, like you mentioned, you grow this extended version of a family and you do stay close majority of the time. I share that often with our surrogates, as you do as well. And a lot of them are very surprised to find out. And similar to myself, I did match with intended parents locally to me, not necessarily locally, but in the same state as me. And I always do share that this is kind of a disclaimer. This doesn't always happen. They were still about 2 hours away, and we still only saw each other a handful of times, which in comparison to surrogates match with intended parents in a different state or even maybe internationally, they may be surprised to realize that the majority of this is just a connection, communication, and we live in such a virtual world now where we get to connect in so many different various ways. So thank you for sharing that. I love that you kind of gave us the example between that and how it also relates to many surrogates going through this process themselves. So let me ask you, final question. Do you have any words of advice from a seasoned surrogate, words of advice for any woman who is in the early stages of this, or maybe she's just thinking about becoming a surrogate and pursuing her own journey?
I do. I'm definitely not that person that's like, I have so much advice. I don't say it out loud, but I do. I have experience from my own journeys and I use that as often as I can with those that are interested in surrogacy. I think my biggest piece of advice is to be yourself. When it comes to surrogacy, there's the right match out there for you. There's a family who's going to see you and be like, that's our surrogate. I often say the same thing to intended parents because I think there's this unspoken rule, it feels as if you have to say the right thing and do the right thing and always be prim and proper. And if that's not you, then it's not going to last that long. And so research surrogacy, research if this is something that you are really interested in, and the risks, the pros obviously is that you're helping a family bring their child in this world. I wouldn't say that there are cons to surrogacy, but there is definitely risk factors, and taking those into account, just as you would anything as a person. As mothers, we research what our children watch, what they eat, what they do, and I would take those same rules and apply that to surrogacy and apply that to really anything you're going to do in life. Sometimes we make quick, brash decisions and just run into something. Surrogacy is not one of those things that you just want to jump into. So that would be my biggest kind of piece of advice. And then if it truly is on your heart, continuing that research and finding the perfect agency to represent you, to help you with your journey, to be an extension of what you are wanting. And whether that is a brand new relationship that you just fully commit yourself to, maybe that's a little bit more reserved. Those are things that your agency is going to do to help you. They're going to look for that perfect family, perfect match. And from there, you're presented obviously a file or a profile. That profile is going to contain hopefully what you're looking for and be the beginnings to a beautiful match. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice, just going into it. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that's impactful, but honestly, there's so many things that I still don't know as a surrogate, as a case manager, because every journey is different. So I think also just kind of going back to finding that perfect agency, being comfortable with your case manager, being comfortable with your coordinator at your intake, those are things that are going to help you overall, because the only true goal of an agency is just to be able to provide you with a journey that you're expecting and to help you get over hurdles throughout the journey, through answer those questions that you may not have the answers to. So yeah, being sure that you're comfortable with the agency that you've chosen.
Could not have thought of a better answer for that. I mean, that was absolutely perfect. I mean, the way that you related your experience and also shared advice in the way of there are risks involved. This is a pregnancy. And while we do have our vision and our hopes and our dreams, and hopefully those all do roll out the way that we intend them to, but that there are risks involved, and support is very important. And all of the things that you mentioned throughout this entire call that we've had is such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was beautifully spoken. I love your journey. I just feel like you have such a great connection with our surrogates, and our surrogates here are going to be absolutely blown away by the support that you are going to be providing them. Someone who's been in that seat, and I share that as our program coordinator. Right off the bat, we're meeting the women that you just described who are early in this process, who are learning, they're researching. So like you said, research, that's super important. And the agency is going to give you so much information, but it is also very important, like you said, to spend some extra time and self-care in this journey and really get comfortable with it. And also knowing that you're going to learn a lot as you go. At least I did. Would you agree?
Definitely. It's
Going through the process is a learning. You're learning so many things while taking a huge leap of faith.
You are. And that huge leap of faith results in a beautiful journey, a brand new soul in this world. So I always try to say and always try to mention, it is a complex and very committed decision to become a surrogate, but it is probably the most selfless thing a woman can decide to do, to help a family bring their child into this world. There's no words. And I say that as an experienced surrogate, but mainly as a case manager who's been honored to help so many women. Surrogacy isn't just about bringing a child into this world. I've watched women become a better version of themselves through surrogacy. They feel more empowered. Some go back to school. Some choose to follow a career path that they may have left behind because they didn't feel that they were capable of doing something. As a surrogate, you complete the most amazing act and you are incredibly capable. And that probably is my favorite aspect to surrogacy, is watching these women come into it thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to carry a baby for someone, not realizing the impact that they have on their family, their friends, their children, their spouses, and honestly themselves. They are completely different women coming out of the journey than they were going into it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I was so excited to meet with you today and to record this video for YouTube and for our hopeful potential surrogates, as well as anyone who's thinking about surrogacy, looking into it, doing their research like we just talked about. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh.